What's going on, Dirty Birds? Tori McElhaney here, joined by Amna Saban and Terrin Walk, and we are about to break down one of the biggest games for the Falcons to date, heading up to Washington, D.C., or Maryland, technically.
Maryland.
Yeah, that general area of the country.
Maryland received no excitement there.
Sorry, Maryland.
Maryland.
I feel like it should be in D.C. Like, I know that we're out in Flowery Branch right now, but we do, like, the Falcons do play in Atlanta. So I have the same qualm with MetLife Stadium that's actually in, like, Rutherford, New Jersey. And they're, like, the New York Jets and the New York Giants.
Yeah.
That's a qualm I have.
I do have a little bit of a problem with that. It's not like they're saying, I don't know. My mind immediately went to, like, the Milwaukee Packers.
True.
I just spent time with my family.
We are recording this the day after Christmas. Also, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all the people out there, all of our fantastic listeners. We love you guys so much, even when you maybe don't love us all that much, and that's okay. But I wanted to start off this podcast with a little bit of fun because I was having this discussion with my family while I was home for Christmas yesterday, and we were talking about all of the gifts that quarterbacks give their offensive linemen during this time. And just as an example, I looked this up. Patrick Mahomes gave his offensive line Rolex watches, Joe Burrow samurai swords.
That is wild.
And then Russell Wilson, a $10,000 Airbnb gift card that can be used anywhere around the world. So, and I know Justin Herbert was taking a lot of heat on Twitter and X and social media because he got them. My friend Chris Rim, who used to work with us here at AtlantaFalcons.com, but he's now with ESPN covering the Chargers. He posted this video about Justin Herbert had gotten his offensive line luggage, and everybody was like calling him cheap because he got him luggage. But I'm like, those specific pieces of luggage were every bit of probably $3,000.
And so useful.
Right. You're going to use that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to use that all the time. Not to say you're not going to use the Rolex watches. But truly, how often are you going to use a samurai sword? Unless you're Kayla McGarry and you get married with a broadsword. Like,
exactly.
I
wouldn't even know where to put it.
But then how often? That's a wedding.
Right.
Once.
One time.
Ideally.
Yeah. Now, though I do know if you've listened to Falcons in Focus podcast, one of my favorite episodes was with Kayla McGarry, and he did say that he walks his dog with the broadsword on his back. So maybe he gets more use out of it than we think.
I would cross to the other side of the street.
So
if
can you imagine
a dog with a sword strapped to the back?
Specifically Caleb. But that brings me to the question. If you were a quarterback in this league making the money that these guys make, and let's just say that
that'd be nice.
Right, that in and of itself I'm fine with. But if you were going to give a gift to the men who put their lives on the line to protect you, not the same, but they do, what would you get them?
Do you have an immediate answer? Because I have two.
Mine's like very personal and kind of lame, and a real quarterback would never have the time for this. But I'm like, I also can't think in terms of that much money. Like, I don't know.
True,
like,
I don't know what that
probably
means.
Like, I don't know, cars or something. Like that would be.
Didn't Brock Purdy give his offensive line cars? I think he got them full on trucks.
Perhaps.
That's insane.
I feel like that's like an easy thing to think of in terms of that money. But like for me, I think like giving like vintage sports gear of like their like childhood team, whether that's college or NFL or NBA or something like that. It's a very specific thing to me. But like going deep into it, like, because that stuff can get really expensive.
For sure.
So then that's where some of that money could come in. But like, you know, something memorabilia, something that like is very dear to them.
That is very you, because you do love a good thrift find.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like this is right in line. I think someone did do, and I don't know, I don't want to say exactly who it is. I think it was one of the LA teams, but someone got every person in the locker room their high school jersey.
That's so
which
cute.
I thought was so sweet.
That is
and I was
adorable.
like,
I love that.
Oh, but in the same vein, I feel like you and whoever this person was, it's going to kill me that I can't remember who it was, but y'all got it. Terrin,
Okay.
what would you, I can tell you've been thinking about this.
So I have two ideas. One was getting them all like a really nice Alexa, but then programming it so it speaks only in my voice.
Okay. If you're Patrick Mahomes, I feel like that is really a tough. Imagine like waking up in the morning, Alexa, what time is it?
And it's me.
Yeah. Or if it's like you're...
Or just programming it to anything. I don't think it could actually be my voice. That sounds like that's where the money would come in.
Right, yeah.
But like just making it like an Australian accent or something.
You can do that anyways.
I know, but programming it so they can't turn it off. Like something.
That seems like more of a trick than it does a gift.
An alarm at 6 a.m. every day? I mean, they're probably already awake.
This seems like way more of a prank than it does like a kind gesture for all the work the offensive linemen have put in.
That tracks with all my
gifts.
gifts.
That's true. I feel like both of y'all's answers were very answers to you guys specifically.
Yeah. My other was a Roomba.
Just AI appliances.
Terren's like, I will send someone to your house and have it all robot.
A Roomba just sounds so... I wish I had a Roomba.
Terren's actually just putting this out in the world to let people know she would like a Roomba.
I gave my dad an Alexa one year, and let me tell you, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
And now they're everywhere.
Oh, I'm sure,
Every room has a device.
Yeah.
The camper has a device.
There you go.
I'm like, wow, I never need to get you something again.
You do know firsthand how important it is.
Yeah, and I don't even have one.
Right, yeah. Speaking of important things, the Falcons have a very important game coming up this weekend, traveling up to... Maryland to face the Washington Commanders at 8:20 p.m. on Sunday night. This game got flexed. Sunday Night Football should be a lot of fun, and there are so many implications about this game. And right off the top, I think this is where we should start. Playoffs and the potential of being at the top of the division. As a lot of people know, and if you've been living under a rock for a long time, then maybe you don't know this, but a couple days ago, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost to the Dallas Cowboys, putting their record right back at 8-7, along with the Falcons. The Falcons hold the tiebreaker over Tampa Bay because of the 2 wins they had over the Bucs in October. So essentially, mathematically, as long as the Falcons win as many games as Tampa Bay over the next 2 weeks of the season, they could clinch the NFC South. Mm-hmm. The problem with that, though, is you face a Washington Commanders team that is playing really good football and playing very clutch football. You just saw what they did to the Philadelphia Eagles this past week. It's a team that's not only, I think, on the rise, I think they're very well coached. Dan Quinn is the coach of the Washington Commanders right now. Raheem Morris, they coach together. I've covered them both together on the same staff not too long ago. So I'm really curious to see how this game goes. But ultimately, and I think I can say this and not have any qualms about it, this is a must-win game for Atlanta. Mm-hmm. The Falcons have Washington, and then they'll end the season against the Panthers. Meanwhile, the Bucs have the Panthers this week and then the Saints to close out their season. There are so many things that can happen over the next 2 weeks, but ultimately the Falcons put themselves in the best position if they beat the Commanders. That would be a huge win. So I kind of want to start off just by, let's start off with a little bit of hope, Amna. What would it mean to this team, to this organization, to go up to Washington or Maryland and get a win?
It would mean this team is peaking at the right time. Mm-hmm. Even with a starting quarterback that is in his second start. Like, the defense has been rolling. Special teams has come through majority of the season. Like, when you are able to put those 3 phases of the ball together in week 17 against a team like this on Sunday night, like, it really tells you that, like, they're ready for playoffs, and they'll put themselves in the best position to do that because right now they hold their destiny. So as long as you keep winning, you don't have to worry about what Tampa Bay does because you already beat them twice. Mm-hmm. You hold that tiebreaker. And I mean, it's going to be a huge game. Like, I was talking to Jake Matthews about it, who's, the longest tenured Falcon, and he said, this feels like the closest thing to a playoff game that we've had since 2017. And there's going to be a lot that's asked of Mike and of the offensive line, and they're up for the challenge. They're ready for it because they want to play meaningful football.
Yeah, I think that's really good to hear, too, because something that I was saying, and I can't remember who I was talking to. It may have honestly even been my dad. But going back to your point about what Jake was saying about, we haven't kind of been in this moment since 2017. And a lot of that is because the Falcons have for lack of a better term, shot themselves in the foot a lot. And I think that when I look back over the last 3-4 years of covering this team, I actually think that they've been in a lot of moments where they're in this like do or die type of game and moment. And I think looking back, and this has been one of my biggest qualms with the Falcons of late, is that they haven't arisen to the point of surpassing these moments with wins and coming out on top. I think there have been so many moments where they have been in these games that essentially change their fate once a regular season is over. And they've gone and laid an egg in Tampa or Carolina or wherever and not amounted to what you assumed they could and what you felt like they had the potential to be. I think something that a lot of fans tweet at me, and I'm sure y'all get this too, is this idea of the same old Falcons. Like the same old Falcons, and it's become this like huge narrative since they lost the Super Bowl. It's the same old Falcons can't win the big games. If you go up to Washington, beat the Commanders, and essentially put yourself in the position to feel really, really good about making a postseason against this Commanders team specifically, that's kind of squashing that narrative to me of this is not the same old Falcons. This is a different team entirely. It's a different mindset entirely, and they're not going to fall into the same habits of what teams in the past, especially in the last few years, have been. So with that, like, that's what I think the fans should hope for. But hope only takes you so far, and you have to show up, and you have to perform, and you have to win this game. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. So, Terrin, I'm curious, just as you're looking at this, I asked Amna one side of the coin, which was the hope-filled side. And I hate to put you on the spot like this, but realistic, this is a tough team that they're going to face this coming Sunday night in front of a national audience with a quarterback who is in only his second start. There are a lot of variables that go into this matchup. Like weather, it could be pouring down rain. Who knows? But I'm really curious, what would it mean for the Falcons, and not just like their 2024 like postseason hopes, but what would it mean for the Falcons to go up and lose this game knowing that they have everything in their hands right now?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one because they do keep saying they put themselves in this position. The power is back in their hands, but just barely kind of thing.
Right.
And they knew the schedule when they got into this position where the Bucs have, I don't want to say an easy slate, but an easy slate.
Right, you don't know.
You never know what can happen, especially in a division game.
For sure.
But the Panthers and Saints are arguably easier teams to go up against than the Commanders for all the reasons you have listed and why they're doing so well right now. And so for the Falcons, this is a must-win. And I think, like, if they win this, it kind of, like, reaffirms what they've been saying all season long. And if not, well, same old Falcons.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it goes back to the narrative.
Right.
Where you're like, you can kill it. You can kill that narrative and all the people online.
Right.
Well, not necessarily. They're going to keep on chatting.
Of course,
But it does end that, like, oh, here we go again. Oh, did it again. Oh, just the Falcons losing it too late.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you were peaking, but you didn't do it. Peaked too soon, yada, yada. All, like, there's 100 different ways you can phrase it.
Yeah.
But I think winning silences all of that because I have the numbers, of course.
Okay, give it to us.
The Falcons right now, because I use the New York Times simulator for reference.
Hey, shout out.
Love that thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Get a little nerdy. Right now, they have a 48% chance to make the playoff as things stand. If they win on Sunday, that goes up to 85%.
Yeah.
That's a pretty number. That's a pretty number. If they lose on Sunday, that goes down to 30%, which is not passing. It is indeed. Is it failing?
It is failing. It's very, because 50% is an F.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Big fail. Okay, so if the Falcons and Buccaneers lose, though, the Falcons' chances are 81%.
Right. But then you're kind of hoping.
You're hoping
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt like going into this past week.
The Cowboys game?
The Cowboys
crazy game.
Crazy game.
Wild.
Amazing. That was also what I think a lot of people are like, this is what you hope like playoff football is.
Yeah.
I was staying up super late to watch that game, and I was
I was on a flight like,
yeah, no, legit. And I think that it's really interesting because at that point in time, if you're the Falcons, you are kind of like just hoping that you get something. You hope that something else elsewhere falls your way, another domino falls somewhere else in order to help you out. And I get that that's the league, but I also understand that this team went on a losing streak where they lost 4 of 5 games in a month and a couple weeks time. And
that's where they lost a lot of power.
Yeah, and a lot of momentum coming out of October. And I know, like, we can talk all day long about the quarterback situation and kind of the inconsistencies, but to your point, like,
the fact of the matter is they lost.
Right, and the odds are in your favor if you win. It's that simple.
Yeah.
We don't need to overcomplicate this.
And had they not put themselves in that sticky situation, this next one is the biggest issue. The Falcons lose and the Buccaneers win. Their chances drop to 16%.
Right. Then you're just hoping by some hope that the Saints can.
And all of a sudden, all Falcons fans are Saints fans.
Right, which is crazy in and of itself, but that's kind of the nature of the beast.
They're relying too much on another team's downfall for their own success. I mean, they're not saying that whatsoever. But the numbers are.
We can say that, and the statistics can say that, and the numbers can say that. They're if you ask them, they're
focused only on the Commanders, and rightly so.
Rightly so, because you got to get past this game in order to even have an opportunity.
Exactly.
But it's always better when you are able to control your own fate.
Right.
And, you can do that by winning.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. So moving right along, I'm gonna say this because I think it's very, very funny to me that if we go back 2 weeks ago, Falcons are coming off of a win over the Raiders, and it was when everybody found out that the Falcons and Commanders game got flexed to Sunday Night Football. At that time, the Falcons are coming off of a game that even though they won, no one felt like they won, and it was a really like meh time, especially with the fan base, because I remember seeing online, and I do love this fan base because one, they're hilarious. They're incredibly
points
jaded.
For creativity.
So many points.
So unserious.
So
it's ridiculous.
Unserious, and it's so they're great because they wear their emotions on their sleeve, and I love it, and I think it's so funny. But I was watching kind of all of the responses to the flex come in, and it was basically just like. Like it was so many people being like, oh no, like another primetime game, because the Raiders game was on Monday Night Football. And I remember a lot of people were kind of down bad about the game being flexed to begin with. But then they make the move to Michael Penix. And then it completely changes the way that people looked at this game, because it's Michael Penix versus Jayden Daniels. And it's kind of a marquee matchup of what this draft class was. And, I think it's very indicative that the next couple minutes, I'm only going to be asking y'all quarterback questions, because I think that is the story of the game.
Story of the draft, story of the game, everything.
Exactly.
Story of the season?
Yeah, no, 100%. You can't talk about this game without talking about Michael Penix and Jayden Daniels. So let's start off talking a little bit about Michael Penix. We've had some time to kind of sit with his first start. And I know I can speak for myself, having gone back and watched the All-22 a couple of times and kind of dissected his role in the win. And I wrote this in my notebook, and I fully stand behind it, that I thought the performance live, while I was watching it from the press box in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I thought it was a good performance. I thought it was a solid performance. I thought it was a clean performance. Watching the All-22, though, it was better than I thought it was. And so I'm kind of curious y'all's perspective as y'all have set with the game as well, as you're kind of looking at what this Commanders defense presents and what the problem areas are. What do you think about what Michael Penix could get in his second start? Terrin, you want to go first?
Sure. The question you posed to us in like the outline is like, what do the Falcons need from him? And it's to do the same thing. Maybe throw a touchdown pass. That'd be nice. But
hey, if Bijan Robinson's running it in,
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just to keep playing cleanly and efficiently, because I mean, it won. I mean, that's what works. It worked out well, and you could see the offense improving as the game went along. I think that was my favorite thing about last week's game. Yeah, is you could see Michael growing in real time. And so I'm curious now, against a more difficult team, a stronger defense, how that's going to happen. and if it's going to increase that need to improve really quickly or if he's still going to stay steady Eddie. Yeah. And what's been fun hearing in the aftermath of the first game is that he was the exact same guy that we saw in that press conference.
Yeah.
Not rattled at all. And what I enjoy, too, is hearing how many players want success for him. Like, Bijan Robinson and Drake London are, like, fighting to see who gets the first passing touchdown.
Right.
And you like to see that because that means the starters who he wasn't necessarily working with originally are already on board with him, and they're supporting him, and they're wanting to be successful for him. Not that they weren't for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
But it's just like it's a late season switch. And so to see that, it just helps progress this idea that this was the right decision and even the right time.
I think it's you bring up such a good point, too, about the cleanliness of the operation. And that was the part of it that I was kind of most surprised about was
As a rookie,
and the Falcons had no procedural penalties at all in that game. And that was shocking to me because you think about all of the variables that go into someone at that quarterback position getting the play call and being able to spit it out clearly, concisely, quickly, and being able to execute it as well. And something that I've talked about before about this position that he was in was that a big problem for the Falcons over the last month of the season prior to Michael Penix getting the start last week was the fact that I felt like the Falcons needed him in that start to just not get in the way of the game.
Yeah.
Just to do enough to keep the chains moving, just to kind of have a mistake-free game. And even though he had some moments where he looked like a rookie quarterback, which is to be expected as his first start, I thought that he limited the mistakes that he made. And even when he made a mistake, like even if he kind of overshot somebody or threw it at their feet or didn't get his feet set, he was still making the right decisions as to where he was putting the ball and who he was targeting. And I think that matters to me when I'm thinking about the longevity of someone in this league. So, Amna, I'm curious to your knowledge and as you're kind of looking at what Michael Penix could be in his second start, what do you feel like he needs to do as they go up to Washington this weekend?
You know, kind of just more of what you guys said, like just play clean. Like the way he was decisive, even in like that moment where he almost got sacked but didn't and was able to like somehow hold his center of gravity and throw it away where it wasn't in danger and, you know, not getting like a penalty on that as well. Like just those little things, but also like the way it was impressive that there was no like, you know, penalties or anything of that sort, but it was also impressive the amount of like creativity they were able to have on offense, which I was surprised at. Like there's a stat from Next Gen Stats, and I think it was they use 81% of motion at the snap, which was their most they had all season, an increase from like 26%. So the fact that like he's coming in his first start and is able to play with guys that he hasn't, you know, just
doesn't have a repertoire
with. Like Darnell Mooney was like getting reps with his high school QB because he was a lefty. Like these are the things that they've been trying to do to get acquainted with each other. So for them to be able to do that in the first game, like I'm very excited to see what they can do in the second one. And I mean, it may be rainy. That may be something he's very used to as someone who played in Seattle.
True.
So,
good point.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I remember when we were up in Washington, we in 2021 when the Falcons played LA and then turned around and played Seattle a week later, and we practiced that week in Washington, and it was like rainy and cold, and it actually like wasn't. It was actually beautiful weather the whole entire time. And I remember someone asking Marcus Mariota, who played in Oregon, they were like, you know, how are you gonna feel if it's cold and rainy? And he was like, you do realize I've played in played a lot of years in this, right? And same for Michael. He's kind of to a certain extent not going back home. It's a different Washington, but if it is rainy and cold, that plays a factor.
Just being able to keep the operation clean, in the elements like that,
that's all you need from him. That's to me, like you don't need him to be this big, flashy, like just chunking the ball downfield. I mean, if he does that, great. Cool, the Falcons will take it, but the most you need out of him is a clean operation and just making sure that the Falcons are on track to stay ahead of the chains.
I feel like I've said this so many times this season where it's like, let's not get cute until you're efficient. Like
inconsistent.
Yeah, until you're like consistent with it. stay simple. Like,
yeah, don't complicate things. Yeah. No, I get it.
You're getting too, what is it, ahead of your skis?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never actually
In
skied.
over your skis? I don't know. I don't ski
Something
either.
like that.
No idea.
Unfortunately. These are three people who have never skied.
The cart before the horse?
There you go. Don't put the cart
I've
before the
never
horse.
attached a cart to a horse either, but like.
The analogies are what they are.
Yeah.
Y'all get it.
Yeah.
Y'all get it.
Like,
So
don't do that.
Right.
And I think having to almost start over with a rookie is forcing them to do that and keep things simple so he can get comfortable and figure it out and find his groove. And then you can start tailoring things more around him and what he's good at and build from there.
Yeah. But I also think even in the same vein, like the Falcons didn't have to like simplify it too much. When you go back and you look at the game plan itself and what they were executing, like Zach Robinson was right in the week leading up to it that it was going to look pretty similar outside of a few wrinkles here and there to better fit Michael's skill set. And I think that ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean, he knows it. He's been
Right.
studying this offense all season, even if he hasn't been the one actually taking the
Right.
live rep. So
Yeah.
that wasn't surprising, but it's just like, get good first.
Yeah, right. And get consistent and be efficient. So let's move on to the other side of the coin. And one of the NFL's biggest names right now, because of what he's done in his rookie year, is Jayden Daniels. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that he's quarterbacking a Washington offense that is pretty high powered, and it has the ability to showcase his legs, his mobility, his athleticism, but also his arm strength. And you know, granted, he's made a couple of mistakes here and there, but for the most part, he's doing what needs to be done to put points on the board for this Commanders team. And I'll be honest, using the Eagles game as kind of your base point, even if there was miscues and missteps by this offense, the Commanders' defense played well enough at times to kind of minimize the damage. So as you're looking, Terrin, I'm going to start with you. What is it about Jayden Daniels that is the most dangerous? What about his game is the most dangerous if you're the Falcons game planning for him?
His legs.
Yeah.
I mean, his arm is obviously what got him drafted, but his legs are what's making him unique right now. The Commanders are the only team in the NFL whose quarterback is their leading rusher.
Right.
And to be fair, Brian Robinson Jr. has missed 3 games, and he's only like 20-ish yards short. So if you had those 3 games, he's probably the leader.
Right.
So it's like a caveat, like a little asterisk, but still, that's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, that when you look at what Jayden Daniels has been able to do, we've talked a lot about Michael Penix in his first start and the cleanliness of everything, and the fact that Jayden Daniels has been able to, I think, handle everything within his rookie year has been, and also let's just be honest, the games that they've won and the fashion of which they've won in to go back to the Bears.
Exciting.
Yeah, the Bears.
The Bears.
Like that game again recently against
Him
the
with
Eagles.
The Hail Mary.
But,
Ooh.
like he's just a playmaker.
Yeah.
He has this like live, like this almost like alive nature to him, which I realize is probably a weird thing to say. Like you always hear about people saying like someone has a live arm. I always think that Michael Penix has a live arm. It's like so vicious in the way that he can get the ball into his playmaker's hands. But with Jayden Daniels specifically, he is somebody who 100% is a dual threat quarterback, and there is no doubt about it because to your point, just the stats alone, but also his feel.
I do have the stats.
Okay, so when his feel for the game is just, I think he's playing a little bit beyond his years.
For sure.
And I think the Falcons, when you don't have Troy Anderson out there at middle linebacker, a speedy quarterback that has the ability to get outside the tackles and to move the ball downfield, not just to scramble, but to actively move it 10, 12, 15 yards is very tough on this defense. And so, Terrin, what are kind of some stats that stick out?
So overall, he has 128 carries for 737 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. He's averaging 5.8 yards per carry.
Yeah.
So when you say he's out there and picking up yardages beyond just scrambling, he is. And then he's averaging 49.1 yards per game on the ground in general. But then on his strong suit, 301 has completed 301 of his 432 passes, which for perspective is 69.7%.
So right in line, I think, with league average.
Yep. And for 3,303 yards, 22 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions.
Yeah, again, he's taking care of the ball.
The touchdown to interception ratio is crazy.
Right, and that's the thing is, like, this is somebody who we're talking about in the context of being Rookie of the Year. Like, we're talking about in the context of what he's doing in his rookie year is almost unlike, I think, a lot of things that we've seen. And the fact that the Commanders has been a team that I think a lot of people pushed to the side going into 2024. You can't do that because of what he's been able to do, and give credit to the coaching staff to putting him in the best situations to allow himself to succeed. But speaking of the coaching staff, something that I was listening to today was Joe Witt Jr. was talking about how he was actually talking about Michael Penix and how Michael Penix was someone that they brought in during the pre-draft process, got to know a lot about, and they ended up, of course, drafting Jayden Daniels. Falcons ended up drafting Michael Penix, but the Commanders know a lot about Michael Penix and the Falcons, Jayden Daniels, vice versa. So, Amna, what's interesting about that, though, is as you wrote this week, Jayden Daniels and Michael Penix have a good relationship with each other. So tell us a little bit about kind of what that connection is and even the juxtaposition of where their careers are to this point.
I love a good juxtaposition.
We love a good juxtaposition.
Truly. But yeah, no, these are two guys that started working out together in the pre-draft process ahead of the combine, and along with Sam Hartman, who is the Commanders' backup, they forged a bond and they become good friends. Jayden and Mike talk on the phone often. Like, it was just last week that they last did, and they both had like very kind words to say about each other in the press conferences this week, which is nice. But yeah, when you look at their trajectories, there's a similarity there, and they are two guys that are 24 years old as rookies. They had significant moments in college. They even like transferred in a similar way, like in their junior seasons, and found a lot of success. You know, obviously they're two guys that were. Jayden was the 2023 Heisman Trophy winner. Mike was first runner-up. So, like, these guys have kind of run in parallel lines. So, for them to be able to meet in this moment is kind of like, there's a lot been building up to this.
Yeah. What's interesting, too, is you talk about these parallel lines that were running throughout their college years, but then it diverges once they get drafted to their individual organizations, because Jayden Daniels is drafted as the guy.
Yeah.
Michael Penix is drafted as the heir apparent. And with the assumption at the time and the plan at the time, hey, man, you're probably not going to see the field if things go the way that, you know, the Falcons wanted it to. You're going to learn behind Kirk Cousins for a few years. That didn't happen. We're sitting here right now in week 17, and that's the plan has been shifted and it's been accelerated. And now you have Michael Penix. So it's really interesting to see the fact that, like, Jayden Daniels has all of these reps and moments, and he's being talked about among the upper echelon of quarterbacks right now. And because of what he's done and because of how much of a threat he is throwing the ball and running the ball, Michael Penix is kind of coming into a completely different situation. And that's what I find so interesting about those stories, is that they started off so parallel and now they're back to being parallel. But to get to the point of what the last 6 months has been since they were drafted, I think you could it's two completely different stories.
Google Maps versus Apple Maps.
Yeah. Well, sure. All right, let's move on just to wrap everything up. Terrin, we're going to start with you. And Will, this is for you because this is Will's favorite question of the podcast. And in the podcast, Terrin, what is one thing the Falcons need to do to get a win on Sunday Night Football?
Contain Jayden Daniels. I think what will be really telling is we've talked a lot about like the pass rush lately and how the Falcons have really turned a corner. And I'm curious to see now how they're going to do against the Commanders.
Well, it'll be a good marker. No, that was good because I think that it actually will be a marker of how much progress has been made because of the fact that you think back to the quarterbacks that they faced very early on in the season.
Yeah. They were
Jalen Hurts.
Mobile.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield, I know he's not, like, some people don't consider him a mobile guy. He can get on it. Like, he can break a few tackles. We saw him do it over and over and over again. Patrick Mahomes. There were some big-time quarterbacks that they faced in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season that presented them a lot of issues because of how mobile they were, because of how much they could escape the pocket. Now you've recently had a few more pocket passers that the Falcons have been able to get after, but you're going back to somebody who right now is one of the best dual threats in the game.
I mean, he's second behind Lamar Jackson in rushing yards.
Correct. So because of that, it's like how much better, we've been talking about pass rush. It's time to prove it. How much better have you gotten? And when you're facing someone as speedy and slimy and not sticky at all, like how can you stack up when those type of quarterbacks gave you so many issues very early on? Amna, I'm going to give you the chance to answer too. What is one thing the Falcons need to do to earn a win on Sunday?
I feel like this is a pretty universal answer for any game, but like win the turnover margin.
Yes, 100%.
Especially when you're going to be out in the element, it's going to be cold, probably rainy, all these things. Like you want to play a clean game and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot in this particular game, especially.
Yeah, because you give the Commanders chance after chance after chance. And they're
gonna take them.
They're gonna take them. That's the thing, is
That's
like
the difference.
Jayden Daniels is gonna get his yards. He's gonna get his passes. He's gonna cause damage. It's about limiting that damage, and if you can take care of the ball and also capitalize on mistakes they do make. No one's playing a perfect game.
Right.
That doesn't happen. If you can do that, if you can, to your point, win the turnover margin, I want to say 9 times out of 10. I don't know what the exact numbers are off the top of my head. But if the Falcons, this year specifically, if the Falcons have won the turnover margin, they have almost always won the game. And I think that just speaks to kind of what we've said over and over the last month when we're having this conversation about Kirk Cousins and how Zach Robinson, Raheem Morris, and even Kirk Cousins himself said, I'm giving the ball away. And you can't be doing that, because
it's the number one reason they switch.
Right. And that to me is like, if possessions are at a premium and you're giving the ball away and you're playing in 1-score games,
it's too risky.
It's too risky. So I completely agree with you there about the turnover margin. So it's going to be a crazy game, though. I think that it's going to be, you hope it's a fun game. You hope that it's playoff caliber.
I hope every game is a fun game.
Of course. We do hope every game is a fun game because it makes our lives more fun.
Yeah.
And it gives us something to talk about, which is nice. But it's all for the marbles going up there to face the Commanders. So To Maryland. Yeah. I'm glad that joke has made it full circle. But I think that's all I got for you guys today.
What's one thing they got to do, Tori? You got to answer your own question.
I mean, I agree with y'all. I think that it's playing cleanly.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to turnovers. I also think it goes to like containing the pocket. It kind of goes into a little bit of everything, which maybe is a cop-out, but I think it's just playing clean football.
Like a Roomba.
Like a Roomba. To bring it full circle.
We love a callback. That was great, Terrin.
Hopefully the Falcons can do that, but I think it's time for us to head out before Terrin makes another vacuum joke
or God forbid an Alexa joke.
God forbid an Alexa joke. Like, we need to get out of here. But thank you guys so much for joining us. For Terrin and Amna, I'm Tori. This has been the Falcons Final Whistle podcast presented by Zaxby's. You can check us out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, your Alexa. Hey, honestly, set up some reminders that like anytime our episode drops, you get a Alexa notification.
Automatically play it, volume 10.
Right, yeah.
Hey, Alexa, play Falcons Final Whistle or Falcons Podcast Network.
Yeah, hey, Alexa, yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We will see you, after a Washington Commanders versus Atlanta Falcons Sunday night football game. Hopefully we have a lot of good things to talk about, or just things to talk about in general. So we'll see you next time, you guys.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.